Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Anyway.
Old but not classic sitcoms.
Like what?
I don't know, like Golden Girls or like King of Queens or like Seinfeld, like Cheers, stuff that's on, but not like I'm not like gonna go out of my way to watch it. I like music that like women would never listen to.
They call that scaring the hose music.
Yeah.
You heard that term?
No, I haven't, but that's pretty much.
What's your scaring the hose music?
I don't know, like Faith No More or like
Okay.
like any kind of certain kinds of metal that's not it's all good.
Like Palladium music.
Yeah, Palladium music, exactly.
Palladium
exactly,
music.
exactly.
People watching, I mean, we are in Worcester, so I guess that makes sense. But Palladium music is such like a type of music. That's what my dad fucking loves.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
exactly. I mean, that's
Kill Switch and like
exactly,
all that, yeah.
exactly. We're rocking right now.
Yeah, we just
okay.
kind of start.
All right, cool.
Thank you so much
All right.
for doing this. We're in Worcester at the Ring. We
Yeah.
got shout out Beyond Wrestling. Do you want to give like a little introduction to yourself?
I'm DC. I am the owner and operator of Beyond Wrestling and IWTV. We've been running live events since 2011. We've been doing events in Worcester since 2016. We do shows every Thursday at the White Eagle in Worcester, Massachusetts. We're going to be expanding our programming as we head into 2025. We do training every Tuesday and Wednesday. We've got a lot of stuff coming up. When will this air?
This will probably air in 2 weeks.
Cool. So we'll have some big announcements before the end of the year as far as what we're going to do to kind of increase our programming.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The like training and shit. That's very unique to you guys, and like the open mic that I saw that you guys were doing.
Yeah.
Like
So
open mic.
basically, what we've kind of the programming that we've taken to Worcester that we do on a weekly basis. It's called Wrestling Open, and the idea started at the end of 2021, where it's like, what if we do an open mic night for professional wrestlers? So obviously we vet everybody, we make sure everybody has professional training, but instead of me reaching out to wrestlers to put together the show, it's more of a situation of, the wrestlers themselves will sign up to participate, and then we'll figure out who's available, who's going to be on, and stuff like that. And it ended up kind of starting out as an idea, let's get some meaningful reps so these wrestlers can kind of hone their craft and improve what they're doing skill set wise. And it's become like, these lavish characters and like, these intricate storylines. It's very involved. We have a huge team that produces it, and then out of that, we've started doing training. We do training every Tuesday and Wednesday. It's the Beyond Institute of Professional Wrestling, too. So now it's not just finding new wrestlers that, are wanting to improve their ability. It's finding people that have no wrestling experience whatsoever and preparing them at that level.
Oh, that's amazing. Is wrestling a cliquey thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, at every level.
At every level?
At every level. Everybody's just got their own group. And everybody kind of protects their own group. But like, wrestling is as much, like, everybody has to come together to be able to do it. But only you succeed. It's frustrating. So there has to be that kind of, like, good faith where it's like, if I'm helping the team, I know that it's going to come back and help me when I'm ready. But there's a lot of people that are involved that are very selfish. And, those are, like, even though wrestling staged, like, those are the real elements that we kind of have to deal with and stuff like that. I will say with Wrestling Open and what we have at BioPro, it's the least cliquey place that I've ever experienced in the 16 years that I've been doing wrestling. This even goes back to when I would do Beyond Wrestling as standalone super shows. Like I said, we started in 2009, we started doing live shows in 2011. We still do monthly standalone shows. And those are kind of people looking out for themselves sometimes. Not always. And it wasn't always like that. And it's kind of become that a little bit. But with Wrestling Open, it's the biggest team effort that I've ever experienced, because by making it an open mic night, everybody's compensation is exactly the same. So, like, sometimes, we'll produce shows and some people will get $25. Some people will ask for as much as $25,000 for a match. We don't feature those people too often. But it keeps everybody honest. It keeps everybody fair. And, hey, if 150 people came tonight, everybody might get $25 or $30. If 250 people came tonight, everybody might get $60 or $75. So it's definitely more of a team effort. But when you start looking into like different leagues, different organizations, different promotions and stuff like that, it becomes extremely territorial, because at the end of the day, wrestling is supposed to be treated like a business. But we're all kind of fighting over crumbs, especially on an independent level. I want just enough money to be able to do this. I don't care about anything else besides that. If I want more, I would completely change what it is I'm doing so that I could try and go to a place like WWE. I think a lot of the people that get involved maybe initially are like, oh, maybe one day I could main event WrestleMania. You know, the boyhood dream, Shawn Michaels and stuff like that. And then very quickly fall in love with what wrestling is at this level and, you know, where it is a badge of honor, proudly being like an independent wrestler.
Which I think is, and no matter what the art form, what the next stage of everything is. I feel like there's too many lanes of whatever, whether it be music or a comedy or movie. It's like you don't really have to be the biggest thing to make a living or even be happy. Like that's almost seems too much. The independent game where you get to live life you want no matter what seems like a happier path.
I mean, we had so many people that started off, you know, with Beyond Wrestling, and they end up going and getting signed by the major leagues, and then it completely extinguishes their passion for wrestling. And it's like, you know, you're trading off doing what you like for kind of secure money, and not everybody.
Names of it, but why
Sure.
do you think that is?
I think it's just because on an independent, like it's exactly what you're talking about. On an independent level, you call your own shots. You work where you want to work. You present yourself the way you want to be presented. Then, you know, you get signed, and you know you're getting good money for the period of time that you're there. I don't know that it's enough to live off of for the rest of your life necessarily, unless you're able to find like an office job, which some of them do. But you're giving up that freedom in exchange for that financial security, and that's cool. But then there's a lot of people that it's like, well, they're running, WWE's done. Okay, time to come back to the indies. They don't have that hustle. They don't have that grind, and you know, and that's fine too. We were at the forefront back in 2009 when we first started. I mean, we're promoting exclusively with a MySpace page, and then it's like, hey, what about Twitter? Hey, what about Facebook? I mean, when we started uploading our YouTube videos, you couldn't even upload more than 10 minutes, so we'd have to cut our matches into pieces. But nobody was putting out.
Were you doing that because you studied marketing, or were you doing that just because you wanted to do it?
I mean,
like...
why don't we get back to that in a minute,
Okay,
as far as what the
right,
origins of Beyond Wrestling are, because it's very strange.
I'm super ADD, as
Sure.
you'll realize.
No,
with
it's all good.
interview
It's all
style,
good.
yeah.
But you know, we were at the forefront in using social media because it was free. We had access to it, and you know, that was very formative as far as like a lot of how independent wrestling like even came together, and you know, we've pushed trends that have gone all the way to the mainstream as a result of like the heavy focus. But ultimately, to your point, it seems like a lot of things are individualized or independent these days. It's because the technology that we have at our disposal, that 20, 25 years ago, when I was a fan, kind of like watching with a closer eye, you wouldn't have even been able to dreamt of it. I remember putting together, when I was going to college, like a plan, like, oh man, if we could run a wrestling company one day, like the technology at that time was you could go to a concert and for like $100, if you waited around for like an hour and a half, you could buy like a live DVD of the show. Like they'd have the ability to be able to press it on site. And now it's just like, well, like, no, like we do our live broadcasts here, and on our own proprietary website that we own, the replay's up within like 15 minutes. You don't have to own anything. You know what I mean? You pay $10 a month. You just have access. It's you know, it's stored on a server, whatever the case may be.
And do more people watch live than, of course, that are here?
It depends. I'd say it's a toss-up. I'd say it's about 50-50.
Okay.
Certain shows get much more viewership online. Certain shows get more viewership in person. So, but those numbers are about the same, about a few hundred on each.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, back to the, I
Okay,
guess...
the origins of Beyond Wrestling.
Yeah, well, that's cool that you said you made a plan for this back in college.
Yeah.
So, was that... All right, yeah, the
Okay.
origin.
So the plan that I made for this was separate than what the origins of Beyond Wrestling originally were. Mm-hmm. And now Beyond Wrestling has come far enough that Wrestling Open is kind of the weekly program that is designed to kind of be like... when I started telling people about getting involved in wrestling, like, people don't understand that, like, independent wrestling isn't the same as amateur wrestling, because amateur wrestling is more like collegiate or Olympic style wrestling. So it gets like very confusing. So it's just like, okay, like Hulk Hogan wrestling. And then for people that are older, the first thing that they'll say is there was this place in Attleboro called Jack Witchy's in the 70s where they would have wrestling every Friday night. And like my dad had the opportunity to go, but he never went with his neighbor. But like people always say like, oh, like Jack Witchy's. And so the fact that, you know, in 2015, 2016, when I would try and explain to people what I was doing, it was so many people would always talk about Jack Witchy's. I was like, man, there's got to be something, even in, you know, a modern age, of doing like weekly wrestling. That's not how Beyond Wrestling started. Beyond Wrestling started, I was doing backyard wrestling. All my friends kind of stopped because it was like, you know, okay, we're in college now, like fucking grow up. And through a message board, I'd met all these people that were kind of in the same position. So they'd have
So
like...
you started backyard wrestling in high school?
Yeah. Because it was on like a local public access station, like backyard wrestling, you know, the best of tapes and all that other stuff. It was big. One of my friends was doing role playing on a message board, and he was like, I think I could put together like a card. Do you guys want to come over and like kind of act it out? And one of my other friends was doing tape trading. And what would happen is he would get these like Japanese tapes, and the people that would copy and did their own backyard wrestling, and they'd throw in a tape for free. And I mean, you pay $40 for like 6 hours of footage. So if somebody was giving you 2 hours of backyard wrestling, you could watch those tapes up and down.
Yeah.
Not like it is now. So we did backyard wrestling, and again, like, it got to a point where we had enough people that were interested at a level that, like, they wanted to get in a car and, like, let's go to Pennsylvania, let's go to Tennessee, let's go hang out with these other guys. We met them online. It was weird, but it was fun. It was cool, you know? And I keep meeting people that were professionally trained. And I was like, I don't understand it. Like, you have access to a ring and a roof and training. Why are you doing what we're doing? Like, you're encroaching in our space. And as I became friendly with them, I was like, no, they like the freedom of the performance. So when Beyond Wrestling first started, May of 2009, I had moved out to Ohio at that time. I was living with independent wrestler Ricky Shane Page. And the idea was, let's do backyard wrestling, but only use a professional equipment and only invite trained wrestlers. And I didn't tell anybody, hey, we're doing this as like a pilot to like start this new thing. I told everybody that it was one of our backyard wrestling shows. And then we got the footage, and then it took forever for us to schedule another one. You know, back then just time moved differently. But it was like 4 or 5 months before we get another one on the books, and like half the people canceled. So one of my buddies was like, hey, I got these independent wrestlers from New Jersey, and that was kind of how like it helped us level up like very quickly. And within like a couple months, just putting those matches up for free for YouTube, the thought process was everybody's going to come in here and work for free, but we're going to record the matches, we're going to put them online. So we're not spending any money, but we're not making any money. And you can take these matches and you can use them as a video resume. Because back then people would send out CDs, DVDs, VHS still to try and get booked. So it's like if your matches are online, and now it's not just, hey, this is the best match I had in the situation that somebody that I don't even really like put me in. You get to pick how long you want to wrestle. You get to pick the finish of your match. You get to pick your name and the character you want to portray for yourself. And those guys started getting booked out immediately at places like Evolve Wrestling and like AIW in Cleveland. That like legitimized us instantaneously. It felt like after a couple of years, like our YouTube footage was prominent enough that it was like, let's take the leap and let's start doing live shows. I didn't want to do live shows out in Ohio. I always wanted to come back to New England and with the type of wrestling that I liked because it didn't exist here.
I'm guessing people wanted freedom that you were creating, but why were you guys the first? Like, where did that idea come from that you were like, I'm actually going to give people the freedom they deserve?
It just didn't exist.
But why? Like, why didn't it? Like, why do you think that was? Why do you think you were the first to really, like, actually be like, let's let people do what they want?
It's because I never broke into wrestling the right way. You know what I mean? I had the backyard wrestling mentality surrounded by people that had professional training. Selfishly, they could get what they wanted out of it, which is having fun with their friends, but having the type of matches that were going to help them in their career.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, through my process of being involved, like, I kind of backdoored my way into wrestling. Like, I've learned a lot about the mistakes that we made coming into it. I understand now why there was so much resistance to what we were doing. Like, you know, here, you know, people are putting their bodies on the line in front of a paying crowd. When we first did our shows, we didn't even have a live crowd. The wrestlers wrestled for each other. So, like, there were people like, you're making wrestling look fake. You're costing us money because you're putting it online for free. You're defeating the entire purpose of what this for is if you remove the audience element from it. There's so many just different components, and it was like.
Do you agree with that sentiment now, or do you still feel like?
No. Back then, it was like it was completely necessary. It was what needed to be done. You know, they didn't see it for what it could be. And I mean, we have 3.5 million YouTube subscribers now. We will have done 69 live events this year. We got to play to a crowd of 2,200 people at you know, Clown Chews Beer sponsored us doing Harpoon St. Patrick's Festival in Boston. You know, we got to do a music video for Claro for her song Juna, which was the #1 song on TikTok the day that the music video came out.
Real? I didn't even know.
Yeah, they shot that here. They shot that in this room.
Really?
You know,
How did that come
we had Big Daddy Mark here 2 weeks ago singing to a sold out crowd.
Bro,
so like
that was amazing. The Big Daddy Mark footage was incredible.
Right. So like, you know, we have our own wrestling school, we have our own weekly show, we have our own streaming service. So it's like I have no regrets about where we started. If anything, I became more misguided when it was like, hey, let's start doing this in front of a live crowd. Because the companies at the time, CZW, Chikara, Dragon Gate USA, Pro Wrestling, Gorilla was the exception, but they were all traveling. So it was like, you know, yeah, you'd go to North Carolina and wrestle in front of 80 people, but they were making those inroads. Yeah. We would take our show on the road and maybe only do like 15 to 20 people. So it's like, oh, this isn't sustainable. And we took some time off. We started making more of that content for YouTube where it was just the wrestling for the wrestlers. And then one of my buddies like really pushed me in July 2013. We did our first show at FET Music in Providence, which I named the show American Rana because I wanted to come up with a word that hadn't been used before, so I could track feedback online if there was any. And I remember the show happened. We had Kevin Owens, we had Johnny Gargano, we had Eddie Edwards, Biff Busick, A.R. Fox, Drew Gulak, Chris Dickinson. Masada was on the show. Colt Cabana was on the show. I mean, it was
That's a crazy lineup.
Star-studded lineup, right?
Yeah.
And I remember it was like, okay, like this is our like, our awakening. We're here. Wouldn't it be incredible if we could sell 50 copies of the show on DVD? And that was like, just to put it in perspective. So it's like when we have hundreds of fans here, hundreds of people watching online, the money ain't the same, but we're playing to so many more people when it was like, oh my God, when you look back at that, like that's a crazy lineup. Could you imagine like only selling 50 DVDs?
I think that's really cool for people to listen to, and not to speak on myself too, but I mean, you can look at my setup now. When I started, a lot of podcasts didn't like that I was doing numbers because they have big studios,
Sure.
They have a lot of equipment, and I was pulling up with an iPhone and 2 microphones and doing it independent. But I think people need to hear that truly, that want to start something, that you don't need this high budget, you don't need this like big push that you think you do getting into an industry. You just kind of need to want to do it and then to figure it out from there.
Yeah, yes and no. And then going back to what we were talking about before it started rolling, it's like I always felt like I had a leg up because of the education I had. You know what I mean? I went to college specifically to run wrestling shows. That was what I always wanted to do, and I was lucky that I had a lot of support along the way. I always had a lot of support from my parents, even when they'd let us do backyard wrestling in my yard. I remember one time this kid wasn't even 18 years old. He jumped off the shed. He did a front flip. Everybody moved out of the way. He landed flat, and I was standing on my deck about 50 feet away, a story up, and I could feel the thud of his body from the ground, and it was just like, okay, like this is crazy.
What did your parents say?
My mom laughed and said, "What a dumbass," because he wasn't hurt. If he was hurt, you know what I mean? It would have been taken a lot more seriously. But that was the amount of trust that I had, and then to be able to make the investment for me to get private schooling to be able to get it. So I will say this: I agree with the resources at hand right now. Like you don't need to go big budget for anything like that. But I think that especially with professional wrestling, there's a lot of people that run shows that are not qualified to. I wasn't. But I felt like my education lent itself to the ideas that I was able to put in motion. I feel like there's a lot of people right now that don't necessarily have ideas from a business perspective. They have a vision as far as a different creative direction. And what I will say is that at the level that I'm involved in wrestling now, it's very apparent to me that all of your business decisions dictate your creative decisions. And so if you get into it, anybody with $5,000 can run a show now. But then it kind of disrupts like what the overall value and economy on an independent level is.
How can you tell that a show is being poorly run, or like?
Because everybody will hit me up while it's happening, talking shit.
Yeah.
I can see it though. You know what I mean?
But
I can see the kind of
safety also is a big at the forefront of something that a lot of other fields it's
Sure.
not in.
Sure. I mean, look, dude, it was
You're
crazy.
not gonna hurt yourself starting a podcast.
No,
But
no.
You know what I mean?
No,
You're
but-
gonna hurt yourself starting a wrestling.
Sure.
Company.
I mean, this is embarrassing, but it's also something to be proud of. Is that like very few of these shows like have like EMTs or anything on site. And when we got our sponsorship from Mission Dispensary, that money allows us to literally have an EMT here every week. And it's like, but that's what independent wrestling is, And it's like I think the people understand it, and when they're getting into it. But again, it's just like there's so many people that can run shows now just because they put up the money to pay a wrestler a little bit amount of, a little bit, and it disrupts the overall level of productivity for everybody else. But it's a free market. If all the stuff that I'm complaining about, if there were safeguards and barriers in place, I wouldn't have been able to start Beyond Wrestling. So it's kind of like, but just the idea of like nowadays having the resources and being able to do things independently, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
How would you feel about if you heard high schoolers were doing backyard wrestling the way you did it?
I don't know. I would think it was cool. You know what I mean? I don't know. I guess ultimately what I'm saying is that whatever you want to do independently is fine, but the moment you sell a ticket to a paying fan, you have an obligation of doing something on a professional level at some point. And just having the money to put together a show and saying this is my vision, these are the matches that I want to see, isn't enough of an obligation to the fans. And so you see a very big turnover in terms of independent wrestling fans because they have dissatisfactory experiences. They don't know the difference between XYZ wrestling and and ABC wrestling. And so that's one of the reasons that we're so successful is the amount of marketing, promoting, and stuff. It's not just, oh my God, let's put together these matches. There's so much more thought that goes into it. So,
The first live match I ever saw was here.
do you remember what it was?
No.
Do you remember what year it was?
This was like last year.
This was last year, yeah.
I got into wrestling really late through West Side Gun, which then he was so big into it that it was like really cool being able to go out to DNA and like, just out there and be able to interview like Joe Hendry and do all that. But I got into it late. It was something that I got into late, and then seeing it here, I didn't even realize, as you talked about it, independent wrestling was something like that until I started doing research of you guys.
Sure.
It's crazy. It's cool.
Sure.
So you're from Rhode Island.
From Rhode Island.
Then you went out to Ohio.
Went out to Ohio for a couple of years because the type of wrestling that I wanted didn't exist in this area. So basically, I interned with Kaiju Big Battle. I made connections with Jakara, and one of my buddies, Ricky Shane Page, he lived in Ohio. He moved out here for a couple of years, and when his girlfriend at the time graduated college, they decided to move back to Ohio, and I said, I'm coming out with you. I got no prospects out here for what I want to do as far as wrestling goes. I was either going to move out to Ohio or get a CDL, which is like a complete lack, it's like, okay, I went to school for 4 years to get a BS, but like...
Usually you move to Ohio to get a CDL.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the home of them.
Yeah, exactly. Ricky's dad is a truck driver, so...
Yeah, it's corn and truck.
But, him and his tag team partner Vincent Nothing would have bookings every weekend. Ohio was good.
That type of wrestling out here.
I don't know, because of all of the old heads that were just like, nope. Like wrestling in New England existed to get to WWE. So the idea of partially because of the influence of having somebody like Killer Kowalski in the area, which I can't speak to those experiences because I didn't break in at that time. But Kowalski having a wrestling school where it's like publicly advertised that you could become a wrestler was like prolific. Because way back before that, generations before that, you would just show up to a show and then like try and hang out and see if a wrestler would like take you on the road with them, and you'd have to do all sorts of menial tasks, and they'd get you in the ring and beat the shit out of you. And then if they liked you, they'd keep you around, and eventually like they'd break you in. But that's how the business was protected. So the idea of Killer Kowalski, who's a god in this area, saying like, hey, yeah, come to Malden and just come to my wrestling school is like, whoa, we're kind of breaking down the fourth wall here a little bit,
Yeah.
But the amount of success...
But it was like mainstream wrestling.
Yeah, but I mean like Triple H trained with him, Chyna trained with him, Prince Albert, who now is, his real name's Matt Bloom, like he trained there, Perry Saturn, Frankie Kazarian, and then the next generation like Eddie Edwards, Tommaso Ciampa, Kofi Kingston, Ivar, the Viking Raiders. So there's that strong lineage, but the influence of that school was always, we're going to get you to WWE. And maybe, a couple people a year would, and everybody else, what are you paying? Just keep the lights on? You know what I mean? It's like you can still enjoy your time in this area. And so it's like, I didn't have enough of an influence or enough support to be able to like fight it at that level. Until I went to Ohio and I learned more and I made more connections. Being in Sandusky, we could do shows in Indianapolis, Chicago. We never got out to St. Louis for whatever reason, but even going back to Philly was only like 6 or 7 hours, Pittsburgh. So, you could make these single-day drives, and by doing that, that was when I really built up networks and got more people that were legitimate to come out to be on wrestling. Like, we got Necro Butcher to come wrestle for us before we had fans. We got M-Dog 20, the Super Smash Brothers, and that's kind of how I met like Sugar Dunkerton and eventually Drew Gulak, who was the most legitimate person that we had worked with up to that point.
You're just reaching out to them?
Yeah, and they're seeing what we're doing too, and they're like, this is cool. Everybody knows that anything that can give them an edge, they want to be a part of. So when things kind of like pop off and are like new trends, like 75% of the people are going to be like, change sucks, and the other 25% of the people are going to be like, oh, if I latch onto this, I can get what I want out of it. Just how it is. Again, we all do this together as a team, but it's very individual. So I never really was able to make any inroads, and then by the time we came back here and started doing our shows at Fet Music, with the amount, like even still, I think our first year we only did 6 shows in that calendar year period. Mm-hmm. So it took a while in order to be able to build it up, to be able to do it on a regular basis. It was 2019 when we started Uncharted Territory, actually at Electric Haze, which is right down the road here from White Eagle. It's just on the opposite side of Kelly Square.
Great place, Electric Haze.
That place is so awesome.
Yeah, I've done comedy there a bunch of times.
The vibe rules. The vibe rules. I love this place. I love that place too. I love both places.
This is a cool vibe.
This is cool.
This is pretty crazy.
This is cool.
Dope.
But when we went to Electric Haze, it's like, okay, we're going to do a weekly independent wrestling show, and we're going to do a super show every single week. It hadn't been done before. It was before AEW was weekly on TV. Through that process, I mean, 30 people, when I checked in 2022, there were 30 people in WWE that had worked with us that had full-time contracts, and 70 people in AEW that had full-time contracts. And I could probably say definitively at least 24 of those people had that life-changing, like, eureka moment in a Beyond Wrestling ring. So not just like, hey Sasha Banks or Mercedes Moné, or hey Kevin Owens, we're going to pay you, to be here for the day so we can say that you were here and help our guys in that instance. Like, legitimately, probably like 20 to 25 people that, who knows what their trajectory would have been, but it changed when they came to Beyond Wrestling.
Why do you think that is?
It's because of that. It goes back to that freedom of, like, I'm not going to put the constraints on you. I'm hiring you as an individual that's a professional. I trust what you're going to do. I like what you do. That's why you're here. Why am I going to change what you're going to do? I don't want to put what you do through a different lens. I want you to do it through your lens.
When you're a creator, you have to be into that flow state. And if you have anything in your mind that's blocking you from that flow state, you're not going to be able to perform at the highest level.
But now, Wrestling Open's like the complete opposite. Because Wrestling Open has gotten to the point where we get information from WWE and AEW with how they want television put together. And so we do our super shows once a month that are, like, completely open-ended and, like, loose. Still give that creative freedom. And then Wrestling Open is like, hey, if you want a fast track as an independent wrestler, 7 of the 20 people that they've signed to WWID contracts wrestle regularly for Wrestling Open.
Wow.
So,
What do they want to see?
Okay. Let me see what I can say. I think that WWE specifically is going to be moving into a more realistic style of wrestling, which I am curious to see what that looks like, because when I tune in every week, it always still seems like everything is so much larger than life, and they're drawing, record houses with record gates and record ratings, and everything is just up, and it's like, you have something like Roman Reigns that's just, and the whole Bloodline storyline, everything is so story focused, but I don't know that I can honestly answer what it is that they're specifically looking for. They can tell you all of the things that they're not looking for, and then you have to figure out how to navigate that. But I think that being in, like, a highly structured environment where, instead of saying, like, hey, you're brand new to wrestling, like, sink or swim, it's a lot more, we're going to give you floaties, we're going to give you a raft, we're going to give you, we're going to give you every possible piece of information at our disposal so that you can navigate this waterway as effectively as possible. And so, it's still sink or swim, but it's a lot harder to sink.
Is it the same thing that it's like the social media thing of music, or where it's like there's characters and characters can do more views than, like, actually talented people, and that's what's being pushed now? No,
I mean, there's always, wrestling's everything. Anything that we could discuss all falls under the umbrella of wrestling. So, yes, of course, there's people like that are still, like, super character-oriented, that aren't trained properly and will backdoor their way into a big spot. But for the people that are 7 people that I can specifically say the attributes that are across the board is youth, size, coachable, a certain aesthetic, but it is less restrictive than it was before, because back in the day they would sign you and say, okay, this is your gimmick, this is where you're going to wrestle like. Now it's like, this is something that's so cool to me, but like Aaron Rourke, his moniker that he gave himself is Evil Gay. And it's like he gets to be in the WWE universe as like an openly gay wrestler, as part of his character, as opposed to, I think, they've had other members of the LGBTQ community, but it's not necessarily something that's incorporated into their act.
Yeah.
Fred Rosser, I can't remember what he wrestled there as. He was part of the Primetime Players. What Fred Rosser wrestle as? Darren Young. When he was there, he came out, but his gimmick didn't change. They had this guy in developmental, and then at some point he was introduced as being non-binary. His name, their name was Quincy Elliott by the end of their run, and they were very flamboyant, but like crude. Like it was a heavy set individual. They would lift like their flab and like smash people with it, and ended up getting in trouble online. So for somebody like Aaron Rourke to be able to go in as himself, man, talk about like historic inroads. And part of it has to do with his great training at Create a Pro in Long Island, and then having a support system like he's had here at Beyond Wrestling and Wrestling Open to, figure out who he is both as an individual and as a performer, connect with the crowd, and be able to be trusted with. That's heavy material. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, something that's inevitably going to get like politicized. I don't want to take the discussion any further in that direction, but like, it's more than just being like, oh, I'm a basketball player. You know what I mean? Turned pro wrestler.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a CPA turned pro wrestler. Right.
Yeah. I agree. I feel what you mean, because it's like, yeah, you're going head on against a crowd that might not accept you, but you're just doing it.
Sure, make them accept you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's the type of risks that wrestling needs to keep like pushing the forefront. So I think the WWID program and it was frustrating because it felt like we were 2.5 years into Wrestling Open, and the person that I co-produce with, it's like, man, like I sent him a Facebook status and I was like, this was posted 2 years ago saying, hey, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to see these guys and girls on TV, and like nobody's gotten picked up. Like, are we doing something wrong? Is it just the way the industry changed? Then it was like less than a week later, like getting that phone call being like, hey, here's all the people that you're involved with. We're going to sign them to contracts. We're going to, have story components that WWE is going to run at our shows, and then WWE is going to show that footage on their platforms. So it's really cool. But that's not going to be everybody's path. It's not like, oh my God, now we're just here to serve WWID. We're still going to have wrestlers that are going to want to go to AEW. We're still going to have wrestlers that are going to want to just, make Wrestling Open and Beyond Wrestling their home. People that are going to want to just go to, hey, I've never been to the West Coast before, but if I can get booked out there for a place like Prestige Wrestling or West Coast Pro, they're going to pay my way out there and I get to go on vacation. I want to go to Mexico. I want to go to Japan. I want to go to England. I want to go to Germany. There's so many different opportunities as an independent performer. But I think the wrestlers themselves need to set their goals first and then figure out what it is that they have to do to work towards it.
So what do they not want to see? What can you say that they don't want to see? Like, for people starting, what should you not do?
Like doing drugs on camera. I know that like pot is legal and stuff like that. I'm not straight edge, but I don't do any drugs and I very rarely drink. But like to me, that's like a common sense type thing. I don't know. And it's funny because different people get away with it, like RVD and Matt Riddle, and they had the guys from TNA Wrestling come in. What are the guys from TNA called? MSK. What are they called in TNA? The Rascals. Thank you. And like they used to do like a spoof of like the '70s show where they're all like sit around and like pass the blunt, but you never see the blunt on camera. Yeah. But that's up to WWE. Once you're in WWE, that's up to them to decide if they're cool with it. So like that's like a big no-no, like doing drugs on camera or like any sort of drug references, like swearing or vulgar language, and just kind of like anything in general that it's like you got to think that they are PG television. With independent wrestling, like especially like you've seen deathmatch wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some hyper-sexualized content on independent wrestling. Like it's very much sometimes geared towards an adult audience. Like really nothing is off limits. Well, you have to think about the stuff that's off limits in WWE. And if your presentation is that on an independent level, chances are if you go there, since everything is forever on the internet now and people dig that up, like it could come back to haunt you. There's people that have actively been there for tryouts that have, quoted rap lyrics with, racial slurs in them. So even taken out of context, that's enough to cost them from getting a job. So I think that's like the biggest thing. They want to see people that are taking their conditioning seriously. And I don't think I think anybody that's wrestling at any level, like if you get introduced, like we'll have students that'll come here and it'll be like, okay, like maybe you didn't know any better, even though you've been watching wrestling all your life, and like these giant oversized humans are like slamming their bodies into one another. Like, yeah, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you thought that there was like a trick. Yeah. But like at some point it's like out of respect for yourself, that's why I'm not a wrestler. You know what I mean? Out of respect for yourself and out of respect for your opponent, like you don't have to necessarily look a certain way, but you have to be able to function a certain way. Yeah. So I think that those are big. And then unique presentation. If they have 300 people in their system right now, why do they need a 301st person? What are you going to bring? I always tell people that. On any level, what can you do that's better than anybody else that's in the room with you on any given night? When people leave here, they might not remember your name, but they might say, oh, that's the wrestler that did, that's the wrestler that ripped their shirt off. That's the wrestler that had, the silly haircut. That's the wrestler that said XYZ line. Those are the things that people have to figure out to incorporate into their act so that they can build a connection with the crowd. And once they have that connection, those fans will tell other places like, hey, I like this person. They'll have more support and they'll be able to kind of expand where they're working, how much they charge, being able to sell merchandise, all that stuff. It all kind of goes in order.
How do you feel about the PG versus R-rated wrestling?
I think there's room for both. I like producing both. You know, I want to have a second weekly show so that we can have one that, because Wrestling Open right now, one of the things that I feel is like we've been doing shows here for 3 years in this building. I don't think that it's stale, but we've dabbled with doing a couple things that are a little bit more adult oriented, a little bit more vulgar. For example, the former Bear Country, they came up with us in 2019 with Uncharted Territory. Then they got a reboot in AEW. Now they're the Iron Savages. It's 3 guys, they pull their singlet straps down and they yell Titty City, you know?
Yeah.
It's harmless. But if we're trying to present like an all ages product, like kids aren't, you know, some parents aren't going to be happy that their kids heard that. So it's like, well, why not have a show where you can say Titty City, and why not have a show where you can't say Titty City?
That's such a funny example,
right? But like for doing shows in front of like a drinking crowd where
I
it is
just
mostly.
imagine seeing someone getting their ass kicked and just being mad at Titty City. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, right. Wrestling's inherently violent, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, you're upset about the language being used, but not the depiction of like somebody getting their brain smashed in.
Well, it's like whenever someone tries to book me for, I do smoke weed. I smoke a lot of weed. You probably smelled it on me when I walked.
It's all good. I ain't telling nobody, all right?
I'm snitching on myself. But it's like when I get booked to do PG shows, I'm like, I can tell clean jokes, but like, I still am gonna be stoned.
Sure.
Like, I know inherently that's not for me, but
Sure.
it's just so funny. Like, I mean, I guess there is some. If you're going to take your kids to see wrestling and then you go see a Nick Gage match, it might be a little different. But
Sure.
like Titty City was just a funny.
Yeah, no,
funny
I mean, to me, it's innocuous as you know, as I'm approaching 40, you know, and I don't have anybody else in my life that I have to take care of, you know. But if my parents come and help out at the show sometimes, you know, and my parents are not prudes by any stretch of the imagination, but there's sometimes, I mean, look, we did a show one time where somebody got a blow pop jammed up their ass. That was a little bit too far for most people, you know. We you know we did an angle back
Actually?
Oh yeah, actually. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we did an angle back in October that pushed a lot of the wrong buttons, and it was a big turnoff for a lot of people. And it's like, you know, we want to push the boundaries as far as, you know, as a creative person, I'm always interested in seeing what those boundaries are. And then when you push them too far, though, you're like, yeah, you know.
Can I ask what it was, or do you not want to talk about it?
Oh, you know, it was the angle that we did with Drew Gulak and Masha Slamovich, where Gulak asked her in the ring, you know, do I make you uncomfortable in the locker room? Because he's come out of WWE with a reputation, unjustly, of being a bully, and because, you know, she's a female that got spun into like this like sexual harassment type thing.
Oh, okay.
You know, and it's just like that's not what we were presenting, but that's the context that it got brought into. We live with the consequences of it, and we move on. You know, to me, there's a lot of people that bring that stuff into the realm of kind of bad faith because it grabs headlines.
Mm-hmm.
But
Negative headlines are always going to get more than.
Of course, I was thinking about this earlier today. It's like, we're back to it's like, you know, there's no such thing as bad publicity, because literally the only thing that gets publicity online is people arguing about bad things. If you like something, you hit the like button. If you dislike something, you have to have discourse about it.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, and there's people that will bait and intentionally negatively engage and take things out of context because they can get more clicks out of it. And you know, it's funny, as much as we built stuff on social media, it's like, my God, I want to take things out of the realm of social media. I'm so proud of what we built at Wrestling Open, because there's hundreds of people that come every week, and it's like, it's not because I tweeted them. Yeah. You know, they understand that they've been marketed to on a real world level, and I feel like a lot of the, you know, discourse online doesn't even reflect a lot of what happens in real life anymore. But you know, the idea of having something that is, you know, vulgar, pushes the buttons to extreme stuff like that, and having something, you know, that's enjoyable for anybody of any age within reason, because again, it's still wrestling. Like, sometimes people will say, "Is this an all ages show?" And it's like, I can't control if people in the crowd swear. I want to get to that point. If we start a second weekly show, I want to get to that point, because let's say I want to do something bigger with the footage. Like, at some point, I've had videos that are flagged on YouTube that I can't make money off of because people are chanting, you know, Nick fucking Gage as he's coming out during his entrance. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so that right there is like, I'm personally fine with it, but in the realm that I'm trying to, you know, present this, they're not fine with it. So they're the ones that are setting up the boundaries. I have to play by their rules if that's the platform I want to put it on. Yeah. I think there's room for both. And I think that there's room for the same organization to be able to produce both. And I'm kind of surprised that WWE hasn't moved forward with more adult content, and maybe it's something that they will do, you know, when Netflix comes around. I think that there's some people that are hopeful for it, but I don't know that it necessarily makes wrestling any better or any worse. I thought the Hell in a Cell match with Drew McIntyre and CM Punk, that was like my favorite mainstream match I saw this year. And it's like, it's hard to say, like, man, if those guys weren't like bleeding or like, you know, kind of taking some extra risks than what you normally see, does it still get elevated into that category? And you never know with wrestling, because unlike any other, you know, form of media, you have one shot to produce it, right? People, the more that I've been involved, like kind of watching the school and stuff like that, like learning how to wrestle is almost like learning a language, but you speak the language with your body. So if you're having a match, it's almost like having a conversation with somebody that's fluent in that language. And it's very easy to tell if the two people aren't fluent, because it doesn't look like wrestling at that point.
100%.
So you never have a second chance to do your same match. You have one like when we shot the Claro music video, there were like 3 specific shots that they like set up over and over again for 6 hours. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to run a bonus match for you guys at the end of the night. Bring your camera out. And the match ran like 10 minutes, and they were like, what the fuck? Like, half the video was that. And it's like, but you guys didn't even set up shots. It's like, no, that's the language these guys are proficient in. They know how to do all this.
The people who are
right.
Exactly.
But you know, it's not like a movie. It's not like a music video. It's not like writing a song. It happens once in that moment. And, you know, back in the day when it was so scarce, there was more replay value. But now it's like, I don't know, if you follow the Red Sox, they play, what, like 140 games a season? What is the most diehard fan? The most diehard person's not going to see all 140 games. They're certainly not going to attend all the home games. Yeah. I'm sure there's people with season tickets and their packages and whatnot. And yeah, of course, there's a few people that do. But you can still be a fan. How many people do you think are like, oh, I'm going to record the game and go back and watch it in this day and age? Like, probably not that many. And that's kind of what wrestling has become. So these matches all just exist in this one moment, and you'll never be able to know if you've pushed things too far or if you didn't push them far enough until afterwards, and you don't have a chance to do it again. Yeah. So you have to live with whatever it is that you produce. Yeah. And that's something that makes wrestling so special.
That's what I told you. You know, I very much appreciate you sitting down with me, especially not being a newer wrestling fan, but something I appreciated about it so much is how similar it is to stand-up comedy. Sure. In that way. The spontaneity of it is the beauty of the art, you know what I mean? The it's in this moment, and you can record it, but the reaction of the moment is the beauty of it, you know what I mean?
And that's what's real about wrestling. That's what's real about wrestling. You know, say fake stage, whatever words you want to use. The emotions that you can make people feel is because of the planning that goes into it. And that doesn't mean, oh, we're going to get in the ring and I'm going to, you know, do this move to you and you're going to do this move to me. It's the planning is all in what the situation ends up being for when the match itself presents itself. And then when the match happens, you can have that real connection. With wrestling, we have the ability to have your favorite team win the Super Bowl every night. And that's if everybody is on the same page in terms of what the objectives are, if the people that are involved are skilled enough in order to be able to handle the material that's given to them. There's so many different factors. But there's more of a chance of your team winning the Super Bowl if you're a wrestling fan than there is just leaving it up to chance if you're a sports fan. And I think one of the things that was so frustrating with mainstream wrestling up until like the last 5 years is that it was just like, you can give us these moments, you're in charge of it, it's fake, fucking give us these moments. Yeah. And they just, the absolute refusal to drove fans away. And now that Triple H is in charge and Vince McMahon isn't, I'm not backstage at WWE, so I can't attribute it solely to that shift. But the fans get the moments that they want more often. Sometimes that makes things more predictable. But if you can produce something that you know is going to make people feel happy, like, that's powerful. You should do it.
Why don't you think they were doing it? Why don't you think they were creating that moment? So what do you think about Vince's leadership was?
I just don't think that they looked at it. I think there were other things that led them to making decisions other than let's make people happy. So, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, we want to make people happy. We want to make enough money to be able to keep the lights on. You know, we want to make sure that the wrestlers themselves are having like a meaningful experience when they're here. You know, there's so many other things than like, let's just make people happy. And it's the order that you put them in. And I think, you know, they had record TV deals. So it's like, well, you can't say that they're doing something wrong. But to me, it's like, let's make people happy, and that's everybody. That's doesn't matter what side of the guardrail you're on. You know, we don't have guardrails when we can avoid it, and to me that's symbolic, because whether it's the people buying tickets or the people that are performing, like, this is all one community. And it's like, our responsibility is that if the number one priority is like, let's make people happy, our business partners, everybody, and then let's make all of our decisions based on how we can make people happy. You don't always miss the mark, you don't always hit the mark. That's life, but if that's what you strive for, I think that's what you have good intentions, then, even when you miss the mark, it's kind of like, well, you can hang your head and say, well, we did the best we could.
Yeah.
That's integrity. That's integrity, right?
Yeah. Did you ever try wrestling?
I did. So Vinny Marseglia, who's in AEW now, he's in a tag team with Dutch, who used to wrestle for us as Bill Carr. He had a ring in his backyard, like a legit ring. And so I just assumed like they were all trained. And I trained a little bit, but we went to his house and he was like, hey, we're going to do a battle royal. And somebody like double chicken winged me, like both my arms behind my back, and like threw me over the top rope. And I did like a full somersault and landed like crisscross applesauce, heard a big pop in my knee, and I was like, all right. It took me 3 months to get diagnosed, another 6 months to schedule my surgery, and then another 6 months of recovery. So that was
it was a serious.
Yeah, I blew out my ACL. I think I had
How old were you?
19. So I must have had, I think I tore I had a partial tear to my PCL. I think I had a partial tear to my LCL, my meniscus. It was like a pretty, but like it was weird. I could just get by with a blown out knee if I wasn't doing anything super athletic.
I love that didn't turn you away.
No, well, and then I came back and it was like, okay, I would train here and there, but it's like, I'm sure I'm fat. What's realistic? And I would get really bad performance anxiety. Like really, like that was probably more of a deterrent than the injuries or like my lack of a natural ability. Was I would put so much thought into it that it would like make me sick to like think about, and I was just like, this is something I want to do, but it's not enjoyable. Let me find other ways to get joy out of it.
Did you have a character ever in mind that you were like,
no,
this is what I'm good?
No, I always wanted to. I always wanted to wrestle as myself. Even like I remember like when the internet, people would come up with screen names, and it's just like, no, I want to be me. That me bucking the trend was me not having an alter ego. So I just wanted to do it as me. I have a singlet, which is literally just a picture of my own face on it. So, the girl that me and Ricky lived with at the time, his then girlfriend, she was becoming a seamstress, and somebody had asked her to make a singlet. She's like, if you buy material, I'll make you a singlet. What do you want on it? I was like, just put me on it. She's like, this is so stupid. But it was, for her a way to figure out what the ultimate design was going to be so she could replicate it.
Yeah. What was the bloodiest match you've ever had here?
The bloodiest match we ever had here?
Yeah.
Oh my God. The first thing that came to mind is we did Nick Gage versus Mance Warner, which was supposed to be Nick Gage versus Shotzi Blackheart. I think we ran a special where everybody that bought a ticket for a certain day, we would buy 1,000 thumbtacks. I think we did a 40,000 thumbtack match. And like I have a picture of Mance's hand, and it looks like on both sides, it looks like there was a pattern of just being drilled. And he was a school teacher. He's like, I got to go to work the next day and hide my hand from the kids. Like, what do you?
His hand, what about his fucked up face?
Oh, everything. But that was the point where it was like, this is so violent that like the performers can't even perform within the realm of what we've given them. It was just too much. Somebody might have gotten their shoe taken off at one point, but like you could not move in the ring. It was just covered in like things that are gonna puncture you. 40,000 thumbtacks. So
any other come to mind?
That wasn't necessarily the bloodiest. I mean, we've had instances. There was a match between Nicholas Kay and Anthony Stone, and later on the card was a first blood match. The opening thing, Anthony Stone goes to throw a chair, and Nicholas Kay is supposed to catch him, and they were probably going to do like a kick from it. He threw it in a way that it slipped through his hands, and it slightly rotated, and the side of the chair hit him here, and it split him here and split him here, and he was just instantly, like, he kind of went down with it, and he had the chair because he went to pick it up to swing it again, and the inside of the lip of the chair was like a pool of blood already. So
and that was a first blood match.
No, that wasn't a first blood match. So it completely took all the piss out of the first blood match that was supposed to happen later on in the card. Yeah. That guy, I think it was Eric Corvus, fucking bled like a pig because it was like, well, now I got to fucking top these guys. Thanks a whole hell of a lot.
God damn.
And the guy's not, somebody like Eddie Edwards and Biff Busick were supposed to wrestle after that. And it's like, what the fuck? We have to wrestle in this guy's blood. And it's like, shit happens, man. You know what I mean? But those are the things that now it's like, okay, now we know there's a possibility that somebody could bleed even if they're not supposed to. Let's not put a weapons match on before a technical match because it's not fair to the technical guys that are going to be wrestling all over the mat in somebody else's blood.
Yeah.
We keep more cleaning supplies on hand now, too. We learn. We're not completely ignorant.
You learned from it. How'd you find this place?
Fence suggested it. They suggested
the perfect location.
They suggested Electric Haze, and they suggested White Eagle, and we started off at Electric Haze because it was a smaller room, and then it was like, fuck it, let's try it for our bigger shows. So we did American Rana here in 2017 and 2018, and when we kind of outgrew Electric Haze, we started coming here for uncharted territory. Now we're here for Wrestling Open, but they did a ton of renovations downstairs, and I think that renovations are coming upstairs. So either way, I've made a commitment to doing stuff in Worcester.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How was the Big Daddy Mark show?
Oh my God, he's the man. He hadn't really, I don't think he had ever left New York, and I didn't really deal with him much directly. I talked to him back and forth a little bit, but, he's got an agent, and I dealt with her a lot, and he came in. Unfortunately, they ended up being wicked late coming from New York. It's like, it's a crapshoot. You could take 3 hours, it could take 7 hours. And he got here, and he was very soft-spoken, and maybe even a little bit like overwhelmed. Just, he had played a show in Long Island earlier that week to like maybe 80 people. So like he didn't say it, but his manager was like, wow, this is a big room. And it's like, yeah, it's going to be packed.
And it was sold out.
It was sold out. And so it was like, is he going to performance anxiety, whatever? It's like, hey, do you want to get in the ring to just do like a sound check? And just like, even with nobody here, he turned it on immediately. And then it was like, hey, do you want to meet some of your fans? Like, when he sat by a table and took pictures and did autographs all night. And then he was only supposed to do 3 songs. He ended up doing 6 songs.
Really crushed it.
Dude, I feel like with Mark, like, when I had first reached out to him, like his manager was like, kind of like, it was still like, hey, like people are making a meme out of it. So are they laughing at him or are they laughing with him? And like we completely blew past that point where it was like the energy was so legit that it was like, no, people are not here to even enjoy it. Ironically, like people are here because they fucking love this.
He's past that. He's like,
yes,
he's
yes,
he's lovable. Like, people love him. Like I love, bro. He's amazing.
He is a genuinely talented performer. Genuinely talented. Not everybody can just get in the ring and even if you wanted to reduce it as singing karaoke, which it is so much more than. He commanded 500 people for a half hour. Like people were throwing money in the ring.
One of his first shows ever.
Exactly. Yeah. The first time he ever came to Massachusetts. So he's the man, wicked nice guy, wicked genuine. His management is super competent. I wish that we could get him back on a more regular basis, and I just hope that in wrestling everybody steals everything. I just hope that the next time he does something in the realm of wrestling, like they're as protective isn't the right word, but I hope they treat him with the level of reverence that he deserves.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy because I saw you guys were having him in the same day the WWE like posted him or something.
Yeah.
But I was like, it's cool that he's doing this because I think that's where the real love's going to come from.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me. This was a really awesome conversation.
Cool.
Where can people find you? Do you have anything you want to promote coming up?
I mean, the biggest thing we got coming up, we do every Thursday. We're committed to every Thursday in Worcester, whether it's White Eagle or somewhere else. And the somewhere else is going to be on Thursday, December 26th. It's the day after Christmas, Boxing Day for in Canada. We're doing, like, for the last 2 years, we've done our show called The Last Stand featuring Steel Cage Warfare, and we sold to capacity. So we're actually going to take the show to the Worcester Palladium.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm hoping that we can do, 600, 800, 1,000 fans. I don't know. Capacity here is about 400. So it's a big risk. It's a big gamble. It's very, this is expensive. That is a million more times more expensive to be able to do a risk like that. But we want to be able to play to as many fans as possible.
You've never done the Palladium before?
We did the Palladium with Beyond Wrestling and Not Wrestling Open, or as originally supposed to be an outdoor festival earlier this year as part of like a concert series. And just due to the weather, they ended up moving it inside last minute. So it was like we would do a match, then somebody would play a set, then we would do a match, then we'd play a set. And it was cool, and it just gave us a taste of like, no, if we have like a full access to do a full-fledged wrestling show. So it's tough to get the cage in White Eagle. We had to take the front door off last year. So the stars just kind of aligned where it's like, let's try this. If this doesn't work, wrestling in the Palladium with our brand isn't going to work. So it's kind of it's a huge risk for us. You know what I mean? We're all in on that.
And when is that?
That's going to be on Thursday, December 26th.
Thursday. Oh, the day after. Oh, that's
the day
awesome.
after Christmas.
Awesome.
And then just 5 days later, we do an annual New Year's Eve show here. It's called Heavy Lies the Crown, and we do a Fans Bring the Weapons match at midnight. It's the first match of the new year. So the fans literally bring the weapons, and we go through it to make sure that there's no glass or anything flammable or like any food or like any animals or anything that used to be alive and stuff like that.
What's the craziest weapon that's ever been brought?
Okay, look, you want to press and talk about stuff that we shouldn't be talking about. I convinced these guys in a backyard wrestling match that they should use a live lobster, and the guy taped it to his arm and he clotheslined his brother in the face, and the fucking lobster exploded. And then I went to a corner and cried because I was like, that was not nice, you know. And there weren't enough people around me to be like, hey man, probably not a good idea. That was fucking crazy. They called him Pinchy the Lobster. There was also an oar that was probably like 4 feet long, and they took what do you call like the thing that you put the golf ball on, a golf tee?
Yeah.
And they took super glue and they spelled out the word fuck on the paddle of the oar, and the guy smashed the other guy in the head with it, and one of the tees went under the skin along the skull like 1.5 inches in. It was fucking gross. When we used to do backyard wrestling stuff, like some of the stuff was fucking extreme.
There's been no crazy things brought here, funny fucking weapons brought here?
Somebody brought one year they brought like a maybe like a 24-inch. It was heavy too, a heavy plastic like dinosaur that they had like nails on. I fucking tossed that shit right out of the ring. Like let's be reasonable here, man. Like back in the day, fans used to be bloodthirsty and they wanted to see people get hurt. And now because there's that expanded community element, it's like, no, we want to see how far the boundaries can get pushed. But if people actually get hurt, it takes people out of it immediately.
Yeah.
We had a guy fall off the top rope on the floor, hit his head. He was snoring loud the whole room. We had to stop the show, that was before we had EMTs on site and stuff like that. People didn't have fun that night. You know what I mean?
No,
you want people to have a good time. That's not fun when you are perceiving somebody almost fucking dying.
Hell no.
So, but anyway, the fans bring the weapons match on New Year's Eve. We'll vet it so that we're
don't bring a lobster.
We'll toe the line. Please don't bring anything like a pineapple. You know what I mean? Like we don't want to clean that shit out of our mat. The single craziest weapon not at one of our shows that I was ever in attendance for is we did a show. I went with Ricky and Vince, and they did a show called AAW in Chicago. And it was in a room like this, but there were no windows, probably about half the size. It was the Berwyn Eagles Hall. And somebody had a beehive that they had removed from their yard, and everything was dead. But when you bust open a beehive filled with dead bugs, it fucking creates this dust, this haze that just stays in the room, and you can't breathe. And I was just like, I had to leave. I was like, it was as if somebody set a fire in the room. Like it was like a rush. Like that was crazy. Like so, yeah. Let's stay away from anything like organic.
That's crazy.
But yeah, so we've got the show on December 26th. We've got the show on December 31st. We're committed to every Thursday forever in Worcester, Massachusetts. We've got 3.5 million subscribers at youtube.com/Beyond Wrestling. Just look up Beyond Wrestling or Wrestling Open on all social media platforms. We've got something popping. And I don't know, what else? I run a grilled cheese food truck in Rhode Island, but that sounds like it's for a separate podcast. Yeah.
What's it called?
It's called Championship Melt. It's wrestling-themed grilled cheese.
Oh, I'm going to have to try that.
Yeah, so we don't come up to Massachusetts too much, but a lot of our bookings dry up during the winter. But if you want a grilled cheese truck at your private event, email championshipmelt@gmail.com, and I'll bring the truck there.
That's amazing.
All right.
Last question. What has kept you going this whole time?
I love it. When I'm alone, I have nothing to do. It's like all I think about is like, just, the lousier aspects of life, I've met so many when I first started, it was like, oh my God, this has potential. I want to see all my friends succeed. And then your friends either succeed or they don't succeed, but like there's a finite period of time for that to happen. And then it's like, wow, this is rewarding on a level where even if it's people I've never met before, it's still incredible to like be involved. So it's like, all the students, I never met them until we opened the school. But now it's like, hey, here's a whole new generation of people that it's like, wow, with our influence, like we can, put these people in the realm where maybe someday they're making life-changing money doing what they love to do. I love to do that. So, taking on the community element, it was something kind of a bigger scope than what I would have anticipated, especially to see how much bigger we gotten, instead of just being able to focus on, just the performances and stuff like that. So there's definitely been challenges, growing pains. The bigger we get, the more obstacles that we endure. But it keeps me busy, it keeps me sane, it keeps me happy, and there's nothing else that I'd rather be doing. And when the time comes and there's something else I'd rather be doing, I'll just ask somebody in WWE for a job, and I'm sure I'll fucking be there, so...
Man, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
You're lucky you got a handshake out of me. I never shake hands. I usually do fist bumps.
You gave me a fist pump when I came in.
Yeah, wow. I hate shaking hands, and that's on camera, too. That was my one for the year, right?
And he gives a good handshake.
As soon as this is done, I'm going to go wash my hands. So.
Peace out, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Anyway.